If you get down and you quarrel every day, we are saying prayers to a devil, I say. Why not help one another on the way? Basil Majid. Just could not live in a negative way, so we make way for the positive day, 'cause it's a new day, new time, and it's a new feeling, a new science. Oh, what a new day. Picking up, are you picking up now? Picking up, are you picking up now?
Salam Tana, Aina Yisterling. Greetings. There was a question was presented to us, and I'm sure maybe some of y'all probably have thought on this, perhaps, at some point. But perhaps it might not have come to one's immediate attention, and it's contained in this week's Sabbath and Sabbatical study that's called Wayak or Sebisibo, which means and he gathered, and it's from the key words found in Exodus chapter 35, verse 1. And in a brief sabbatical introduction to this week's Sabbath, we had touched on it in passing, and even afterward, we thought on it, and we said that we have to do a brief segment on this particular matter, and it's concerning kindling a fire. Is it permissible to kindle a fire? Some diligent disciples that come as Amorit have in the past and even presently have observed that in the book of Exodus, where it lays down the basic law, the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments, that it repeats in a couple of areas. And in this particular sabbatical reading, verse 3, it says, "Bemader yawochachust besenbetek and isatin tanidu, ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day." Now, from a superficial interpretation of this would seem to indicate that one should not light any fire, and this is one of the reasons why the other Jews, or the European Jews and Ashkenazi and some of the Sephardim and maybe some others, would interpret this as literally, in a literal way, not a spiritual way, a Old Testament way, without the illumination of the Mashiach, or the Christ mind. Without the Christ mind, there's an overstanding. Remember how Christ would say often in the Wengel, in the Gospels, he'll say, "You have heard people of old time say such and such, but I say to you." And he, as Christ, Jesus Christos himself said, "Think not that I've come." The Mashiach says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." So it wasn't change, as we said, but he's saying that he did not come to destroy the law, but he came to fulfill the law. And what Christ, Jesus Christos, did was he changed the law, but he came to do what? To fulfill you know, and this is a very key matter right here. So in that fulfillment of the law, he explained, he clarified, and he deepened many matters. It's the law of, it's the relationship of Christ to the law. What's the relationship of Christos to the law? So let's first begin from the Moshe. Honored his father and the mother, the law, by clarifying, by correcting, by deepening, by enlightening the true intent of his Father and our Father, of his God and our God, as the very Son of God, or the Bein Ha-Elohim. This is what is important. So now, taking that as a basic perspective, so we are interpreting the Belui Kidan, the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, from the light of the Hadith, the Hadith Kidan. So we are looking at the Old Testament through the eyes, or have to look at through the eyes of the perspective of Christ, through the illumination of Jesus Christus, of Christ and his kingly character. Now, why is this important? Because it's very important as we now embark on what does it mean when it says, ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. Senbet ken isatina taniddu. Now, the first area that we want to submit into the record is we want to go to the Jewish Chomesh, you understand, all the 5 books of Moses from the Masoretic Torah, which is used in congregational worship, and we're in Wayakel or Wayakel here, and Moses assembled. Now this took place on the 11th of the Hebrew month of Tishri, the morrow of what was later to be the Day of Atonement, it is said. The object of the assembly was to ask the people for their free will offerings toward the tabernacle, and also to demand the payment of the half shekel, and also to demand the payment of the half shekel. Now we touched on the half shekel, actually the Ethiopian buru, the currency. We spoke on that in the 21st Bekut Arhacho Gize, was called Bekut Arhacho Gize Ki Tissa, you understand, which we have now seen to be clarified as with the key word. Let's just go back there with the key word. The key word there, that is 3011, and the key word in that was tekebla, and let's just make a notation right here for our record, for the record right there. So it's tekebla, when you take, when you receive, ki tessa, when you receive. So that was speaking on, we spoke on the shekel, somewhat in an introductive way, but briefly. But now we're going to speak on what does it mean to kindle no fire. What is meant by this somewhat metaphoric phraseology, kindle a fire. Now some will say it's obvious, basically light no fire. So that means if you turn on electricity, all that, that's fire. Now some would actually view it from a literalistic interpretation. Now one thing we have to remember is what the Bible, what the New Testament teaches us, that the natural man doesn't perceive the spiritual things of God, you see, but the spiritual man understands and understands why the natural man sees it naturally. He's able to see it naturally. He is spiritual, but he is in a sense supernatural. So he is not just physical, but he is metaphysical. So the physical interpretation of it would basically state that no physical fire. Is this truly what is meant? So when we looked at the notes that the Hebrews or the Jews had, and we touched on it before, where it said kindle no fire. Now the expression by Marinya is isatin tanidudu. Now it's going to be important for us to have a couple of reference materials. One is the Wolf-Leslaw Concise Amharic Dictionary, because we need to go to the root word, you understand, of kindle. We need to also look at this word in the Strong's reference through the Masoretic scrolls. We need to also look at this through the metaphysical, you understand? So there's some background study that we need to do, that we've done in order to present this here and now, but we're pointing this out for other students and others who want to study this on their own, or to develop a system or a process when such a question about a curious verse or a meaning needs to be clarified or further illuminated upon. Now, kindling fire on the Sabbath, although included in the general prohibitions against work on the Sabbath, and we find this in Exodus the 20 and 10, is here specified to indicate either that this form of desecration, unlike other forms, renders the culprit liable to the punishment of flagellation or beating, and not to the death penalty, or that if a man committed several acts of desecration at the same time and in the same circumstances, he has to atone for each one of the acts separately. So this is some of the various opinions that has been presented by the Rabbim or the Rebbim concerning this particular verse and the meaning here, namely kindling no fire, or kindle no fire on the Sabbath. Now, although it says, it continues to state in the footnote, although during festivals, during the Moedim, or at the festival, feast and festival, the Ba'alat time, which fall on a weekday, kindling fire for the preparation of food required exclusively for the day is permissible. Kindling a fire for that day is permissible. On the Sabbath, it said, it is forbidden. So what we need to do, and let's just do this right here. Let's go to 20 and 10. Let's go to Exodus 20 and 10 and see what 20 and 10 basically says. 20 and 10 is where it says, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to Yahweh, to Yahweh Eloheka. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. Now, it specifically does not speak on kindling a fire, although we need to understand the cultural context of the time, because see, we're looking at it today, and if we now say, well, no fire was supposed to be kindled in that time, and we remember to keep the Sabbath holy, that means that, well, all electricity is a fire. So does that mean that electricity has to also be turned off? We have to turn off in order to keep the Sabbath? Remember, the Sabbath was made for man. It was made for man's holistic benefit, the Almighty being far above man and his ideas and his vision. You understand? He already sees further ahead than man can even imagine. Understood the holistic benefit of keeping the Sabbath as a what? As a rest day, because what's written in Orit Zed Miraf Salasa Amist, or Exodus, the Torah, the Orit Zeh of Sa'at, the coming out, Miraf chapter, Salasa 30, Amist 5, verse Hulet, verse 2 is important. It says, Sadistic and Sarai deragal. Sabatenyo en gin la exyabihir ye irefta senbet ye tekaddesak en yehona la chikwal ye misara betum mahulu ye gadal. And all who work in it, let him be killed. You understand? All who work in it, all who work in the Sabbath. And it says, ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations on the Sabbath day. Now, when we compare, remember the footnote that we gave from the Jewish Chomesh, this is just to refer to, well, what is their perspective? What's their interpretation about it? Now, their interpretation is interesting, but it's not altogether correct. It has certain interesting points and facts that we can glean from it, but it's not the true overstanding, because besides, the majority of so-called Orthodox Jews reject the Moshiach as Yehoshua, although some have seriously and truthfully considered that Yehoshua is the Moshiach. So there is still the opportunity for them to come to salvation as well. But what we need to understand right here is that the phraseology of kindling a fire, and now we're going to bring a next evidence into, we're going to look up in our concordance, the English. Let's look up in the English concordance. What we want to find is the phrase kindle. Now it's interesting because Kindle is a book nowadays. They have this new thing called Kindle. So a lot of the younger folks, the younger generation, they don't really use a phrase like kindle a fire. You understand, because of how modern forms of language have superseded the Old English over time. But let's go to the word kindle. We want to look up the word kindle, Kindle, and other words related to it. So here we have kindle, we have kindled, we have kindleth. Now, one thing we noticed in our preliminary study of this particular portion of Scripture, Exodus 35:3, where it says, ye shall kindle no fire, and seeking to no fire throughout your habitation on the Sabbath day. A couple of key things here. First of all, we dealt with the portion of kindle no fire. Now, what we want to touch on is the word kindle. We want to find out other places, both in the Hebrew and in the Royal Amharic, where the root word that's used here in the scripture, in the respective scriptures, where the root word is found. Now, this IOTA program, as we have been speaking on, is quite valuable to us, and we give thanks and praise to those who created this program, because when it helps us save time in biblical studies. We get to find out now, as we click on the verse to go into the Strong's Hebrew, the concordance, we have the King James Version, the KJV, with the Strong's numbers. For Kindle, we have the Strong's 1197, the 1197. Now, when we click on that word, the 1197, it brings up ba'ar, bawar, bawar, ba'ar, ba'ar, bawar, which is a prime root, which means to kindle. In the example, i.e., consume, to consume by fire, to consume by eating. There's also, as a denominative from 1198, to be or to become, which is interesting. There's another form now of this ba'ar, bawar, which means to become brutish, to be brutish, to bring, to put, to take, to put away, to take away, to burn, or to cause to eat up, to cause to eat up, to feed, to heat, to kindle, to set on fire, and in the example of to waste. Now, there are scriptures too that we can follow up. There's many scriptures here where this root is found throughout the Bible. Now, we don't have the opportunity to go into each of them, so what we're going to do is a brief summary right here on Kindle. because in our concordance, the Cruden's concordance, we have kindle, and we see that kindle is associated, even from this particular Strong's, the Strong's Hebrew reference. We see that it can mean to consume by fire, or it can mean to consume by eating. So kindle a fire, to consume by fire, to consume by eating. Now, yes, it says kindle no fire. Now, the word kindle can also mean to become brutish, or to bring something, or to put something away, to take it away, to burn, to cause it to be eaten up. You understand? To cause it to be set on fire, to cause it to be wasted. But now the phraseology, when we understand the parabolic logic of the people of the Bible, of how they use words, to describe certain ideas, we can call it the Hebrew slang. You understand what the Hebrew slang, to say how they use a particular highly descriptive form of language, saying one thing but describing something else. You understand? Or describing something on another level, another layer of consciousness, a more spiritual level. So we have the physical kindling of a fire, but now we need to understand this particular command here. Ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. We need to understand the physical level. We've touched on lighting a fire. Does it mean light no fire? Today that means turn off all your electricity, everything. Is that the reference of the Almighty? Or is the reference a metaphysical? It is something dealing metaphysically. When we look at the 1197, the Hebrew 1197, we have yet to address the Ethiopic as of yet, whether from the nadade, and then the tenadade, you understand, form in the Ethiopic and the Amharic. But we're touching on the Hebrew first and the Masoretic first. We see from the meaning that's provided to us, 1197, it's a prime root, ba'ar, means to kindle, to consume by fire or by eating. So the idea of being consumed by fire. Now what we find is that fire, the idea of fire and kindling, symbolizes anger and wrath. Anger and wrath. Now this is the metaphysical overstanding of kindle no fire on the senbet day. The metaphysical overstanding of kindle no fire on the senbet day has to do with matters of anger and wrath. You understand? Like it says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Don't carry these toxic, burning, consuming attitudes in your heart and your mind. They will consume you. So when it says b'maderiyawo chachuist besenbetekand isatina atanidudu, it's saying the Sabbath time. And when we return to verse 2, it puts it into context. It says, Sidistic and Sarai Regal, that 6 days shall work be done. There are 6 days for work to be done. Sabatenyauk and Gun, but on the 7th day, Le'egziaber, for the sustainer, for Elohim, for Yah, Yod-He, Waw-He, for the Almighty, Ye'ereft of rest, senbet, a Sabbath of rest. So it's putting the idea of the senbet, the senebete, you understand, and the ereft, rest, a senbet of rest, yetekedesek, and a holy or a set apart day, yehon la chachal, it will be, he or it will be for you all, that whoever works, you understand, or whoever works in it, all that work in it, yigedel, let him be killed. Let them kill themselves. You see how, like, let's look at this metaphysics. Let's look at society now. People don't generally, even in this so-called post-Christian society, that's originally why they came over here, for religious freedom, right? That's what they told us, for religious freedom. But they're not so religious anymore. They work 24/7. You understand? And they're killing themselves. They are putting themselves to death. You put yourself to death if you don't keep the Sabbath as a rest day. And not just not working, as verse 3 shows us, where it says, "B'maderiao chachuist, b'senbet kanisatin atanidu." Do not kindle any fire in your habitation. And the key word there is maderia. Maderia. You understand? Which means a dwelling place, a living place. But it doesn't say in your tents. Notice, it didn't say in your tents. It could have used the word dinkwan. Dinkwan no chacho. You understand? It didn't say in your houses. You understand? It could say beto chacho. You understand? But it uses the word habitations, bamarinya, bemaderia, or chacho. Now, here's what's very, very interesting. When we look at the word maderia, you understand? Now, let's look at this from an Ethiopic. Let's look at this from an Ethiopic perspective. Let's put this in our search right here, and let's look up maderia in the New Testament. And here is what is very, you understand, or here's what's very, very interesting when we get to the New Testament and we look up this word. You remember when Christ says, "In my Father's house"? Remember that? In my Father's house. You understand? In my Father's house there are many mansions. And he goes on to say that if it was not so, he uses the word menoria, which is living space, which is a space of living, right? But then when we address where he says Ba'bate beit bizu menoria alle in dihis bayhon bal khwachu nabar sifra zegaja lachu zen ehedalhuna. Now when we put in to this search maderia, you understand, maderia in the New Testament, okay, yeah. In the New Testament, right, it has the idea of, okay, let's just go to the Old Testament for a moment. There's 8 references right there. But what we wanted to show is, okay, this is it. So now when we understand the word maderia, let's understand the word maderia in context. So the kutera matinya. Let's study the verse, to study the number, the verse. Let's look up the word habitations. Habitations, maderia. Right? Remember we said he didn't say your houses. He didn't say, because see, the tabernacle is known as a maderia. See, the tabernacle is also called a maderia, a dwelling place, a habitation. You understand? And when we look at this word, the word is moshab. Moshab in the Hebrew. Moshab. And it's from the Strong's 4186. Moshab, or Moshab, right? And Moshab, they say from the 3427, it's a seat, right? A seat, because it connects actually with the word wenber bamarinya. You understand? In the Gu'is, you understand? And menber in the Gu'is, figuratively, it's a site. Abstractly, in an abstract idea, it's a session. So we have to understand this word from, say, from its Hebrew Masoretic root. You understand? Masoretic root, because the Ethiopic is and the Amharic is really clear, but the English, if you study even the King James well, and then you compare the study of the King James with the Ethiopic, what you will find from studying the King James, you understand, studying it and show yourself approved to God's standard of overstanding, you will see that the King of Kings has that already, that meaning is already embedded in there. You understand? From, if you are able to read the metaphysical, you understand, as a faithful and an educated or learned and enlightened Ethiopian. Now this word Maderia or Maderia Wachachu in the Royal Amharic, you understand, in the Hebrew is Moshab. Now Moshab can mean a seat, right? Figuratively, it's a site. In a figurative sense, it's some site, a habitation. Abstractly, it's a session, like a session in the abstract sense. So the eref senbet is a session, you understand, a session of resting from all work. But it's not just only resting from all work or labor, but also resting one's spirit. You understand? Their maderia. You understand? Their dwelling place. That's one way we would translate the word maderia, the dwelling, because mader means to spend the night. You understand? To abide. The sense and the idea of the word maderia, you understand, is an abiding place. So when we look at the Hebrew moshab, we have it as a seat, figuratively a site, abstractly a session, and it says by extension. Now when we extend this meaning, it's an abode, the place or the time. So it's not just, it's not a physical, it's a metaphysical reality, even as we learn this by studying the Hebrew and comparing it to the Royal Amharic of the metaphysical, the book of the seven seals of the King of Kings. By implication, population. By implication, a population, as in an assembly, to dwell in, or a dwelling with the idea of place, a dwelling place wherein dwelt, wherein that dwelt in, inhabited, an inhabited place, a seat, a sitting, or a situation, a sitting, a situation, or a sojourning. So as we begin to understand this idea and then look at the phrase isatina tanidudu, you understand, kindling a fire, and understanding even from the Hebrew that we're able to easily reference, because of this program right now, to kindle, to consume by fire or by eating, to consume, to be eaten up. Now, kindling a fire, these two words or two ideas, you understand, coming into context with each other, has to do with anger, certain negative, certain heated, certain consuming states of mind. Do not be eaten up by anything that causes anger, wrath, or agitation on the senbet day. So in your dwelling, you understand, as you are dwelling in a Sabbath or a sabbatical consciousness, part of your metaphysical and spiritual exercise is to kindle no fire. You understand, which is an excellent opportunity for ones to heal themselves and to fully experience, you understand, the true rest of mind. But it's not going to just come out of the sky. We have to apply ourselves, but we have to learn what the application is. We have to learn from the instruction manual, which is the metaphysical, the Bible, and not just in reading the Bible. Like we said, we got out of a little while ago just telling our brothers and sisters, oh, you got to read the Bible, you got to read the Bible, but now you got to study the Bible, and there's no excuse. With Google and searching and the internet and the ability to get certain reference and resource materials and that are free. And you don't have to pay. People can't say, oh, I got no money. A lot of things, a lot of reference and resource materials out there are free. You know what I'm saying? And for our parts, at the Line of Judah Society of His Majesty, we seek to provide, free downloads, and hopefully, y'all willing in the future, even more free downloads. So when we look at the word kindle, kindleth, you understand, a couple of the references, like Proverbs 26 and 21, where it speaks about a contentious man, you understand, to kindleth, you understand, it speaks about contention, it speaks about anger, it speaks about wrath, you understand, both wrath of man as well as wrath of the Almighty. So we have anger, we have wrath, we have any kind of contending. You see what I'm saying? So some people didn't work on that day, but they were very angry on that day. They were very wrathful on that day. That means that they did not receive yet a reft senbet as a yetekedesaken, as a holistic day. You know what I'm saying? It's a holistic time. It's a holistic session. It's a holistic opportunity. So as we begin to look at the true context of the idea of kindling no fire on the Sabbath day, it's not enough to just say, as one would say, well, I'm not working. This is the day I'm not going to work on the Sabbath day. You understand? And they still are angry in their spirit. They still are kindling the fire. They still have anger and they have wrath. Or like Haile Selassie, Marley would say, they're fussing and fighting. You understand? So if one cannot, or one does not allow themselves that one day, then how can they make it 2 day? You see what I'm saying? Or 3 day or 4 day or so forth. You know what I'm saying? So the Sabbath was 1/7. 1/7 of our time. Only 1/7 of our time. You understand? And we know that the 7 has a lot to do with, some say it's a God number, or it's some say a perfect, it has a sense of perfection or spirituality in it, but he only asks us 1/7. Just 1/7. Just 1/7 of our time. If we would just give that 1/7 of our time. So these are important considerations to consider. So our targum, or interpretation of this, is that it is not just physical fire. He's not really just concerned with like the flesh of bulls and goats and animals, though he loves his creatures and creation and wants us to also be caretakers of them. You know, for their good and for our good. But it's about man. This is why Christ would state that the senbet, that the Sabbath was made for who? It was made for man. Man, we were not made for the Sabbath. To understand what the relationship is of us to the Sabbath. So when we look at the word kindle, the whole idea of kindle, even the root atanididu, esatin atanididu, is very easily spiritually to see that the spiritual point of kindling no fire in our dwelling place, while we're dwelling, you understand, in the spirit of yereft senbet, yetekedesaken, we are to avoid wrath, we're to avoid anger, you understand, we're to avoid those things as much as possible, because of the prohibition, not just of the word, but because of the logical result of, just like it says, for those who work on that day. It didn't say that we are to kill somebody who works on the Sabbath day. No, they're killing themselves. You see what I'm saying? It says, Yemisarabetim hulu yikadel. Later on, the Babylonian Jews and the Babylonian Talmud, and what Christ, the Jews who said they were Jews, who Christ contended against, they had all of these additional laws and traditions and other things and speculations about what should be done and so forth and so on. And the spiritual and the plain meaning was lost on them. So they had certain punishments that they, when they established the Sanhedrin, would actually implement. And in fact, the Sanhedrin
The truth has overcome the lies, the good news of His Majesty in His Christ. And it is vital that we raise our tribal flag, the flag of the conquering lion of the tribe of Yehuda.
Millions of Christians throughout the world, Your Imperial Majesty, will regard you as the reincarnation of Jesus Christ.
Why not help one another on the way? Basil Majid.
Just a little bit easier.
Said we just could not live in a negative way. So we make way